An elderly black woman is thrown out of her own restaurant by a racist manager who sneers, "An old black woman like you? You don't belong here. You'll scare off the real customers." The shocking twist: she's the CEO and owner. What happens next will blow your mind. Before we dive into this unbelievable story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. It helps us bring you more shocking stories like this one. And don't forget to turn on notifications so you're the first to know when a new video drops. Martha Owens was never just a CEO. She was a force to be reckoned with, a woman who built her empire with grit and determination, starting from the modest beginnings of a kitchen in the Deep South. Picture this: a young woman, barely out of her teens, working her fingers to the bone in a family-owned restaurant. That's where it all started. Her dream, her passion, and her first lessons in leadership. As the years went by, Martha's name became synonymous with success, not just for the food she served, but for the culture she cultivated. Respect, inclusion, and genuine human connection were the cornerstones of her business. And those values? They weren't just business strategies, they were personal. She had lived through enough to know that treating people right made all the difference. But even with all her success, something stirred inside her. As the empire grew, could she still keep a finger on the pulse of the people who mattered most? Yet, even in her climb to the top, Martha never forgot where she came from. The hard work, the long hours, and the quiet nights when doubt would creep in like a shadow. Those memories kept her grounded. Now, fast forward to the present, where she's the head of a multi-million-dollar restaurant chain. You'd think she would be sitting comfortably behind a desk, surrounded by board members, far removed from the daily grind. But not Martha. You see, something had been eating at her lately. Whispers of dissatisfaction, rumors of employee mistreatment, and toxic work environments kept finding their way to her. At first, she brushed it off. After all, no company grows as big as hers without a few bumps in the road. But the more she heard, the more she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, deeply wrong. The tipping point came during one of those board meetings. You know the kind where people in suits throw around numbers and graphs, talking about profit margins and market growth. But all Martha could think about were the employees she had seen grow in her company. Were they suffering? She couldn't stand it any longer. When the board members casually waved off her concerns, claiming that issues like these are normal when you expand, Martha's jaw clenched. Normal? Losing the soul of her company was not something she could accept. She made up her mind right then and there. She was going to get to the bottom of it herself. No middlemen, no sugarcoating. Her plan? Bold, unorthodox, and exactly what you'd expect from a woman like Martha. She decided to go undercover, yes, undercover, into her own restaurants. The idea was as risky as it was brilliant. Armed with nothing but a change of clothes and a clever disguise, Martha transformed into someone unrecognizable, a regular customer. Her heart raced as she looked into the mirror, barely recognizing the woman staring back. Gone were the tailored suits and polished heels. In their place, a simple dress, a wig, and the kind of tired eyes you'd find on any hard-working woman trying to make ends meet. This was her way to reconnect, to see firsthand what had gone wrong. But there was also an undercurrent of fear. What if what she found was worse than she imagined? And so, Martha stepped into the unknown. As she prepared for this journey, she couldn't help but feel a strange mix of excitement and dread. Excitement, because she was returning to her roots, where it all began, mingling with the people who made her brand what it was. But dread, because deep down, Martha suspected that the problems might not be as simple as a bad day or an overworked staff. What if the very values she had built her empire on, those same values she held so dear, were being eroded from within? And worse yet, what if she was too late to fix it? When Martha walked into the restaurant, it was like stepping into another world, a world that was far from the warm, welcoming environment she had envisioned for her brand. The hostess at the front didn't even look up from her phone. Martha, now disguised as just another customer, waited patiently, but the lack of acknowledgement stung. The restaurant wasn't even full, yet it seemed like nobody cared. Customers nearby looked just as frustrated, exchanging annoyed glances, but saying nothing. It was in that moment that Martha felt the full weight of the rumors she'd been hearing. She had hoped they were exaggerations, but reality was staring her in the face, and it wasn't pretty. As Martha was finally seated, she couldn't help but take in the atmosphere. It was sterile, cold, nothing like the vibrant, community-driven space she had always envisioned. The staff moved like robots, devoid of enthusiasm. There was no camaraderie, no energy. Even the kitchen, which she had always seen as the heart of the operation, seemed lifeless. The cooks moved with a sense of exhaustion, like they were just trying to get through the day. Martha noticed the way the waitstaff avoided each other's eyes, how they rushed by without so much as a nod or a smile. Something vital had been lost, and the distance between her vision and this harsh reality felt like a punch to the gut. But what hit her the hardest was the racial divide she could clearly see. Martha had always prided herself on fostering an inclusive environment, a place where everyone, no matter their background, felt valued. Yet here, it was clear that certain employees, those who were Black or Latino, were being treated as if they were less important. They were assigned the more grueling tasks, kept away from customers, and there was an unspoken hierarchy that left them stuck at the bottom. The tension was palpable, and Martha's heart ached at the injustice. How had things gone so wrong? She thought back to her early days when her kitchen was a place where people from all walks of life worked together, united by a shared passion. This was not that. Martha couldn't just sit idly by. She started chatting with the staff, easing into conversations like any other curious customer might. "How long have you been working here?" she asked a waitress with tired eyes. The woman hesitated before answering. "Too long." There was a bitterness in her tone that spoke volumes. Others shared similar stories, overworked, underappreciated, and disillusioned. Most were there simply because they had no other option. There was no passion, no pride in the job, and certainly no hope for a future within the company. Every word she heard was like a dagger, each story confirming that the problem was much deeper than she had imagined. Still, Martha wasn't ready to act just yet. She needed to see more, hear more. She wanted to understand every layer of the issue before making her move. There was a growing knot in her stomach as she realized that what she had built was not invincible. The values she had held so dear had not spread as she had hoped. They had been lost in the expansion, buried beneath layers of bureaucracy and neglect. But Martha wasn't one to shy away from a challenge. She wasn't ready to throw in the towel, not yet. She knew there was still more to uncover, and she needed to see it all before making her next move. Martha had been speaking quietly with a young waiter when she noticed the shift in the room. The air seemed to tighten, and without even turning around, she knew something was coming. It wasn't long before she felt the shadow of the manager hovering over her. His footsteps were sharp, cutting through the quiet hum of the restaurant, and when his voice finally broke the silence, it was full of disdain. "Hey, you! What do you think you're doing here?" The words came out as a snarl, loud enough that several heads turned toward the commotion. Martha looked up calmly, meeting his eyes. But what she saw in them wasn't just annoyance, it was something far uglier. "Excuse me?" Martha asked, her voice steady but cautious. She wasn't used to being spoken to like this, and it took her a moment to process the hostility aimed in her direction. The manager didn't let her finish. He didn't care who she was or what she had to say. "People like you shouldn't even walk through the door of this place," he spat, glaring at her with a disgusted sneer. The venom in his voice was unmistakable. "You'll disturb the real customers." Martha blinked, taken aback by the sheer audacity of his words. This wasn't just rudeness. This was blatant, naked prejudice. He looked her up and down, his gaze dripping with contempt, as if her very presence in the restaurant was an affront to him. "I'm just here to have a meal," Martha said evenly, though she could feel the tension building inside her. But the manager was far from done. He leaned in closer, lowering his voice, but making sure the insult landed hard. An old black woman like you doesn't have the money to eat here. So why don't you do us all a favor and leave now before I have to call security? The words hit her like a punch to the gut. For a moment, Martha was speechless, not because she didn't have anything to say, but because she was stunned by how easily he had dismissed her, not just as a customer, but as a human being. He hadn't even asked what she was doing there, hadn't bothered to see her as a person, only a nuisance. You don't belong here, he continued, straightening up and speaking louder now, as if wanting the other diners to hear his final blow. Go on, get out of here before you make a scene. We don't need any trouble from people like you. Martha felt a deep, burning anger rising inside her, but she kept her composure. Years of navigating spaces where she wasn't welcomed had taught her how to stay calm in moments like this. She looked around at the other customers, many of whom were staring but remained silent, unwilling to intervene. Some of the staff members glanced nervously at the unfolding scene, but no one stepped forward. The shame and injustice of it all were suffocating. Martha had spent her entire career fighting to create places where everyone, no matter their race, age, or background, was treated with respect. Yet here she was, in one of her own establishments, being treated as though she was less than human. Before Martha could respond, the manager snapped his fingers at two nearby security guards. Get her out of here, he ordered, with a dismissive wave of his hand, as if she were trash to be discarded. The guards moved toward her without hesitation, grabbing her by the arms. Martha's heart pounded as she was forcibly dragged from the restaurant, the humiliation of it all burning in her chest. As she was pushed out the door, she could hear the manager's parting words echoing in her ears. Next time, try someplace that's more in your league. It wasn't just the words that hurt. It was the complete disregard for her humanity. Martha, who had built her career on the belief that every person who walked through her doors deserved respect, now stood on the sidewalk, stunned by the ugliness of what had just happened. But that shock quickly turned into resolve. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Tomorrow, things would change. Tomorrow, they would all see exactly who she was and what she stood for. The day after that humiliating incident, Martha returned to the restaurant. But this time, there were no disguises, no attempts to blend in. She arrived as herself, Martha Owens, the powerhouse behind the entire operation. The shift in the atmosphere was immediate. Staff members who had witnessed the scene the day before now exchanged nervous glances. The manager, who had so callously dismissed her, stood frozen as she walked through the doors. His arrogance was gone, replaced by sheer panic. He fumbled his words as he tried to greet her, but Martha didn't bother with formalities. We're going to have a meeting, she said, her voice calm yet commanding. There was no room for argument. The gravity of what was about to happen hung in the air like a heavy fog. The staff gathered in the back of the restaurant, unsure of what was coming. The manager stood at the front, looking pale and uneasy. Martha didn't waste time with small talk. She started by recounting the events of the previous day, but not as a victim, rather as a teacher delivering a lesson. I came here undercover, she began, her voice firm but laced with emotion, because I needed to see for myself what was happening in the places I built from the ground up. Her eyes scanned the room, meeting the gazes of each employee, some of whom couldn't even look at her. What I saw, she continued, was a betrayal of everything I stand for, a betrayal of the values that made this company what it is. The silence in the room was thick, and the manager stood awkwardly, knowing what was coming next. Martha turned to him, her expression unreadable. Your actions yesterday were not just unprofessional. They were disgraceful. They revealed the kind of prejudice that has no place here, or anywhere. The manager, who had so confidently humiliated her the day before, now looked like a man who knew he was about to lose everything. Martha didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The weight of her authority was enough. You're fired, she said simply. And with those words, the room seemed to exhale. The staff watched as the manager, once so sure of himself, slunk away, defeated and humiliated. But Martha wasn't done. This wasn't just about removing one toxic person. It was about rebuilding from the ground up. "I don't blame all of you," she said, addressing the remaining staff, "but I do hold you accountable. Each of you has a responsibility, to your colleagues, to this business, and to yourselves. This place is not just a restaurant, it's a community, and that community thrives only when we treat each other with respect and dignity." Her voice softened slightly, the emotion of the moment breaking through. "I've been where you are. I've worked in the kitchens, scrubbed the floors, served tables. I know what it's like to feel invisible, to be treated like you don't matter. But that is not who we are." From that moment, Martha laid out her plan for change. She announced that an interim manager, someone who had a proven track record of upholding the company's core values, would be stepping in immediately. There would be new training for all staff members, not just on customer service, but on empathy, teamwork, and inclusion. "This is not just about business," she explained. "It's about creating a space where everyone, customers, employees, everyone, feels valued. We're not just selling food, we're selling an experience, and that experience starts with how we treat each other." Martha also introduced new policies aimed at ensuring that what had happened here would never happen again. A direct communication line between staff and upper management was established so that concerns could be addressed before they spiraled out of control. There would be more opportunities for growth within the company, ensuring that hardworking employees were recognized and rewarded. But most importantly, Martha promised that the culture of fear and discrimination that had taken root in this restaurant would be eradicated, replaced with a culture of respect, inclusion, and shared purpose. "We will do better," she said, "and it starts now." As Martha walked out of that restaurant, leaving the echoes of change behind her, she couldn't help but reflect on the deeper implications of everything she had just experienced. This wasn't just about one toxic manager, one bad day, or even a few disgruntled employees. This was about something much larger, a crack in the foundation she had worked so hard to build. Martha had always believed that success wasn't just about the numbers on a balance sheet, it was about the people, the relationships, the culture. But somewhere along the way, as her empire grew, those values had been diluted. And that realization cut her to the core. She had spent her life trying to create something that would stand for more than just profit. But what had happened in that restaurant had forced her to confront an uncomfortable truth. Maybe she hadn't been paying close enough attention. It's a humbling thing, realizing that the very principles you hold dear, the ones that guided you from the beginning, can slip through your fingers if you're not careful. Martha thought back to those early days when the restaurant business was simple, when every staff member knew each other's names, and customers were greeted like family. She'd built her brand on the idea of inclusion, respect, and community. But with success came growth, and with growth came distance. Distance from the day-to-day, distance from the people on the front lines. Martha knew now that this distance had allowed things to go wrong under her nose. "How could I have let it get this far?" she asked herself, not in self-pity, but in a moment of deep reflection. There was something powerful in that realization, though. This wasn't the end of her vision. It was a chance to start again, to rebuild with even greater purpose. In her heart, Martha understood that this was a pivotal moment, not just for her company, but for her legacy. What had happened in that restaurant wasn't just a wake-up call, it was a reckoning. Success means nothing, she thought, if it comes at the cost of the values that got us here. Martha knew now that the true test of leadership wasn't just about building something great. It was about protecting it, nurturing it, and staying connected to the people who helped make it possible. And that's exactly what she intended to do. Martha decided that her next steps wouldn't be just about fixing one restaurant or one toxic work environment. It had to be bigger than that. She called an emergency meeting with her top executives and made it clear that from this point forward, There would be a complete reevaluation of the company's culture and values across every single location. We're not just doing business here, she told them firmly. We're building communities. And if we can't do that with integrity, then what's the point? The executives, many of whom had been with her since the beginning, nodded in agreement, though Martha could see the worry in their eyes. Change is never easy, and what she was proposing would shake the company to its core. But that's what real leadership was about, wasn't it? Doing what's right, not what's easy. Martha knew that her legacy would not be defined by her profits or the number of restaurants she opened. It would be defined by the values she stood for, the people she lifted up along the way, and the community she created. That was her real success. And now she had the chance to protect that legacy, to ensure that the company she had built would stand as a beacon of hope, respect, and inclusion long after she was gone. As she stood before her team, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about saving her business, it was about safeguarding her life's work. And with that, Martha knew she was ready to move forward, stronger and more committed than ever. Moral of the story: Martha's story is a powerful lesson for all of us, especially those who have lived long enough to know that age and experience are treasures, not burdens. She faced discrimination for her age and race, yet instead of retreating, she stood firm and reminded everyone of her worth. In life, many of us have faced moments where we were judged unfairly, but it's in how we respond that defines our legacy. Martha used her wisdom, gained through years of hard work, to rebuild her company's values and ensure no one else would suffer as she did. For those of us who've seen the world change over the decades, it's a reminder that some battles are ongoing, but they can be won with perseverance, dignity, and purpose. Have you ever been judged by your age or appearance? How did you respond? Do you think today's businesses do enough to respect older generations? Comment if you enjoyed this story, and also let us know where in the world you're watching this video from. We'd love to hear your stories and thoughts in the comments. If this story moved you, make sure to watch the next video. It's all about resilience and how one person can make a huge difference. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications to stay inspired and keep learning. Your journey is far from over, and together, we can continue to grow and make an impact.